Good morning. Welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on this year Wednesday morning. Rise and shine and give God the glory. And this morning here, I'm looking at a topic. The rates of drug use seems to be higher. So the official rates or the various different rates that they're putting out on drug use. In what I'm looking at from the news and what's going on seems to be much higher, I guess, on the streets than it is being reported or officially being reported. So just wanted to put this out there early or put this thought out there because I always think in this way that if something seems to be wrong. So welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on the challenges of this day and grab some of the opportunities that come your way. Thanks for joining me. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word, for the guidance that you give us to be able to understand the way to view things in this life. I pray, dear Lord, that you may bless us in our study, bless my mind, and bless those who are listening for Christ's sake. Amen. So again, looking here at this topic, the rates of drug use seems to be much higher. So the rates of drug use seem to be much higher. So whatever they're reporting, that there's a certain rate that drug is being used in a society. I read a quick synopsis here, or a little blurb here from what they say, and I have some articles, 3 articles to share with you about what's going on, and then some thoughts from the Word. So the rates of drug use is much higher, and most actually, I think this is connected to 2 trends or a few different trends that are running in the society. The 3 main ones I think is people with pain, and then people want fun, and then people are depressed. And if you look at those rates, as those rates goes up, then I think the drug use is much more rampant than what we could imagine or are imagining to happen. And so the Bible is very clear. As you familiar with this, always read this in Proverbs 20, verse 1. It says, wine is a mocker, and strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. And so, the main original drug of choice was always alcohol, and still today is one of the major drug that is used. Is just simply liquid alcohol, fermented products that is distilled down a certain way to give a high. But there's other drugs, and there's more and more synthetic drugs that are coming on the market. And as we see this, we see the effects of what's going on in the society. So as I say, probably the main 3 drivers is for recreational purposes, for fun, for medical purposes, for pain, and then for mental health purposes, because many people are so depressed and need an escape. And so as we see those rates goes up, we see the result. But the problem is that wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. And so when you look at this, this is part of what is happening, where people are deceived that they're going to get a certain result, and they do get initial result. But just like eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the end result is death, is destruction, is failure. And just like sin, to me, drugs and alcohol is simply sin on steroids. I know that's a drug also, and it just fuels the bad results in one life and early death. And so many people will die early because of the substance. So my interest here for this time I'm gonna spend with you, what I wanted to open your thinking at, well, most actually don't do drugs. But what I want to open your thinking at is that the rates of drug use is much, much higher. We have a bigger problem than what we currently think. Most people would think, whatever they're reporting and saying in the news, that we have a drug epidemic going on. Well, the problem is much larger than we're thinking. And this is recently I've come to the conclusion. I always know that there's an epidemic, but I believe that the epidemic is much larger. And so over the course of the next few months or years, I think we'll see that we have a much bigger problem than what the news is reporting. And that's what it is. So I have some other texts I want to read to you, but I'm going to go straight to some articles and some information. So before I go to some of the articles, I want to read this little quick blurb here. I was looking at various different information from National Institute of Health and I don't think it was WebMD, but there's a few other health, or CDC and stuff like that. And there's various different numbers, but I found this number to be quick and easy. So I'm going to share this with you. This is from a website called verywellmind.com. And their numbers seem to be more or less in line with what CDC and National Institute of Health. So I take it here because it's quickly summarized. And it says marijuana um, use. So, according to the survey, they did a survey of 67,000 persons in a substance abuse mental health survey, and they found that marijuana use was about 90 million people. So, 90 million people, as you know, is not even 10% of the population. So, let's just give you an idea here. So, these are some of the numbers that will start to add up. So 90 million people is about 6%, right, of the population that uses marijuana. Prescription drugs is about 6.5%. So that's almost 2% of the population uses, and this is non-medical use. So this is, we're talking about illicit drugs. So that's 6% uses prescription drugs, but they use it non-medically. So that means it's for their own recreational purposes. Cocaine is 1.5 million users. So cocaine represent point something percent of the population, a very small percentage. Hallucinogens, including ecstasy, I think it's MD something, but ecstasy is 1.3 million users, so almost similar to cocaine. Methamphetamine is 600,000, and heroin is about 300,000. So those numbers, those are some of the general numbers as they survey people, because it's hard to know, because most people even using drugs, and sometimes their family don't know that they're using drugs. So it is hard to put, for anybody to put. So I'm looking at these numbers, and I take these numbers and share this with you because what I'm going to share for the rest of the time is my assumption from basically looking at what's going on and the drug interdictions, that the numbers has to be much higher. So keep those numbers in mind. 20%, 6% of the population, about 90 million people using marijuana. So I don't know if you believe that. It seemed like it's much more. Prescription drugs, 6.5%, or 6.5 million. Heroin, no, cocaine is 1.5 million people. So they're saying, they assume in the population it's only 1.5 million people. So keep that in mind. 3 articles to share with you. And I want to show you that this issue here is much larger, and it is more people are being caught in the snare for whatever reason. As I say, it could be for fun and games or pain, or it could be for mental health problems. So I'll share these 3 with you. And this first one is taken from NBCnews.com, and it is entitled "Man Charged in Suspected Overdose That Killed 3 at Pittsburgh After Party." So, a man suspected of distributing drugs laced with a deadly synthetic has been charged in connection with a suspected mass overdose in Pennsylvania. 3 people were killed and 4 hospitalized at a weekend after party in Pittsburgh. Peter Sanchez Montalvo was charged Monday with illegal distribution of a controlled substance. Federal prosecutors say he offered partygoers a white powder laced with a deadly synthetic opioid, fentanyl. So most actually fentanyl use. Survivors said they thought the white powder was cocaine, but after they did a bump, quote unquote BUMP, of the drug, people immediately began to drop, according to the statement from federal prosecutors. The group had been at a club in Pittsburgh, Brookline neighborhood Saturday night before leaving for an after party at an apartment on the city's south side where Montalvo was staying, local police said. When first responders arrived at the apartment building, Sunday morning, they found partygoer Rubio dead in an elevator, court documents said. Inside the apartment, they discovered bodies of Joel and Josu Serrano, also stated in court documents. Three other appeared to be suffering from some type of medical emergencies and were taken to local hospitals, the document said. Their condition weren't known Monday. An unidentified partygoer told detective that he got into a fight with Montalvo after refusing the drugs, documents said. Sanchez Montalvo was then said to have fled the apartment. Authorities found him Monday morning at a home in a Pittsburgh suburb with a California driver's license, a large amount of cash, cell phones, and packing equipment for heroin, according to the court documents. Sanchez Montalvo faced 20 years to life. Prosecutor says it wasn't immediately clear if he has a lawyer. So this is a case that happened. I saw it earlier this week, and now they finally, I guess, arrested the person. They found all of the equipment and money on him, or stuff on him. So this is one of these cases that when you keep seeing cases like this in the news, and this year, as they say, they were so if you take the numbers that I shared a while ago, that there's 1.5 million cocaine users, right, in the United States. So, it's a big number. 1.5, you could populate a country with that. But if you take that number, you say, well, that's the number according to some of the best estimates. We're trying to figure out how much is using. And then you start to see the frequency of these type of events. Then you start to say, well, I guess it's just amongst those 1.5 million. But the numbers seem to be, these cases seem to be so much that I started to think that the number is much larger, that cocaine use by itself is much larger. And as I say, it's a point something percent of the population is would be, if it's 1.5. And notice here now, they most of the people except one person happily, I don't know if they happily, but they took the cocaine. I'm sure they were probably hammed up and felt good, because it was a part. They went to a party and then they went to an after party, and so it seemed like the after party was gonna be the cocaine party. And the end result is that 3 died and 4 went in the hospital, and they arrest one person, and I guess one person got out because he didn't take it. So when you see this kind of repetitive reports, then it making me think, well, the problem must be much bigger, because the result that these cases keep coming up. So hence the problem must be much bigger. So yeah, I'll go to a second article now. And this article, so this happened on the weekend, what I just read. This other article that I'm reading is reported yesterday. So it's reported yesterday. All right. And it's entitled, this is now from NBC News again. And it's entitled, 5 Dead in New York City Area from Apartment Overdose Caused by Tainted Cocaine. So notice here, this is how many got hit in Pittsburgh. Here is now in New York City. And this article here is started. Authorities are investigating 5 apparent overdose deaths in the New York City area that might be connected to the same batch of bad drugs. 2 middle-aged, I want to say same batch, I'm not connecting with the first article, but they all connected to the same batch for this article. 2 middle-aged men died over the weekend in Yonkers, and investigators are looking into whether the deaths are connected to 3 apparent overdose in Bronx. So Yonkers and Bronx, according to the Yonkers police, the deaths could be tied to the same batch of tainted cocaine. The news of the New York overdose come just after the 3 people died and 4 were hospitalized at the weekend after party in Pittsburgh. A man named Peter Montalvo was charged Monday in connection with the suspected mass overdose in Pennsylvania. Montalva allegedly sold victims a white powder laced with a deadly synthetic opioid, fentanyl, according to federal prosecutors. The group had been at a Pittsburgh, Brookline neighborhood party. Now, back to the ones in New York. Five victims were found in one apartment, and another was found in an elevator outside the apartment, according to police. And it continued. So no arrest has been made in the five New York deaths. So the five New York deaths, just reading to tell you, is not. It's they don't know if it's connected or it's not connected. But Bronx, Yonkers, 5 people die over the weekend. 3 die, 4 hospitalized. So this is the type of stuff that keep being reported, and as you see this reported, it seemed like they were taking cocaine at the after party. Oh, all these cases seem to be connected with, it's almost all men, right? So all these guys going to a after party, no female. So you have these cases that are happening. Cocaine, which, as I say, is supposed to be a very small amount of people using cocaine, but you find something else must be going on, because I don't think the numbers that they're reporting is the same as the numbers that are really happening on the street. The numbers seem to be off, and that is, to me, is that the rates of drug, is my topic, seem to be higher than what is being reported, because some of the reporting is self-reporting, and as you know, a lot of people who are using drugs, they're not out in the open telling people that they're using drugs, especially drugs like powder drugs, because you can have it, use it, and nobody's suspecting that you're using it. It's hard to see, unlike somebody say smoking weed or something like that. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to my third article here, and I want to talk a little bit about the problem here that we're seeing with drugs. So third article here is again from NBC News, and it is Submarine carrying 12,000 pounds of cocaine worth 165 million seized by Coast Guard. And this here is written by David K. Lee. The U.S. Coast Guard captured a 40-foot-long submarine carrying 12,000 pounds of cocaine worth more than $165 million in the Pacific Ocean as it made its way to U.S. early this month, authorities said Tuesday. Crew members of the Coast Guard cutter Valiant launched 2 smaller boats that boarded the drug-carrying vessel and captured 4 suspected smugglers in the Eastern Pacific September 5th, officials said. So this happened in the start of the month. The capture came with the assistance of the Colombian naval assets that arrived on the scene shortly after. According to the Coast Guard statement, a Coast Guard spokesman declined to reveal any more specific details about where the operation took place, exactly where in the Pacific. There are no words to describe the feeling Valiant crew is experiencing right now, Commander Matthew Waldron, the cutter's commanding officer, said in a prepared statement. In a 24-hour period, the crew boat crossed the equator and intercepted a drug-laden, self-propelled, semi-submersible vessel. Each in and of themselves is momentous, even in any cutter's man career. Taken together, however, it is truly remarkably unprecedented. This interdiction was an all-hands-on-deck evolution, and each crew member performed above and beyond the call of duty. The 4 captured men, names are given there, are being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tampa. They each been indicted with 2 counts of possession with the intent to distribute cocaine. It was not immediately clear from which country the submarine originated. All defendants used Spanish language interpreters to illegal proceedings, according to court document. One of the men, a citizen of Colombia, said his lawyer, who declined further comment. Lawyers for the other three defendants did not immediately return messages seeking their comments on Tuesday. In June, Coast Guard seized another narco sub in the Eastern Pacific with 17,000 pounds of cocaine in a daring capture caught on video. That bus was one of the 14 smuggling vessels intercepted off the coast of Mexico, Central and South America by three Coast Guard cutters between May and July. A total of 39,000 pounds of cocaine and 933 pounds of marijuana was seized in those 3 months for an estimated worth of $569 million, officials said. End of article. So here we have now, here some more numbers. So this is now not just, so again, the first two articles I was sharing was just what's going on where people are literally dying, right, from cocaine use. Now here we have these interception, these interdiction of drugs being smuggled into the mainland, and these are they're using in some of these cases are submersible vessels. So that means they're building submarines that are propelled and then send it on in. So you can even imagine it's like watching like a almost like a video game or something, where you have like the Coast Guard is like one of the players, and there are these things coming up the coast in the water just being released, and the Coast Guard is supposed to whack-a-mole them and stop them. But if they get through, it's a whole bunch of cocaine coming up. So this is what it seemed like happening. It's like they're just shipping these things out. So imagine they had a busy time catching whatever they're catching. Now we assume that not all the cocaine is being caught because, not assume, we know all of it is not being caught because we have people using it and dying at rates. So when they say 1 point something million, then that tell me that, well, I guess if this is reflective, in other words, if you're a business person, some of the business, some of the product is gonna be lost. You're gonna have loss of product. It's just part of the business. So I don't know if when the cartels are sending up drugs, if they know, well, we're gonna send up say 100 shipment, and the number here is that they're gonna have 14 bus. So we know it's a ratio. It's a probably 14% say loss. So we send 100 vessels, we lose 14. It's like a video game. The stuff goes through and stuff doesn't go through, but still those numbers are quite high. And if you look at those numbers, a total of 39,000 pounds. So I did the maths earlier, and the math is very high, because you look at 39,000 pounds, I think you're over 500,000 ounces of cocaine. And if it's only 1.5 million, that means is like each person, I guess, is sharing an ounce, three per person sharing per ounce of cocaine coming through just for this interdictions between, what's the month again, between the month of May and July. So that means a lot is getting through. And this is just, we're just talking about, this is just talking about cocaine. We're not talking about any other drugs, just cocaine. The interdiction of cocaine coming in. And again, they arrest 4 guys. One was from Colombia. So I don't know if you can take their word for it, or you just making up stuff, or it's literally from Colombia. But they seem to be always a hotbed for cocaine smuggling. So you look at this, and then you look at the numbers, and then for me, I'm looking at it and thinking, these numbers just don't seem to pan out. These numbers seem to be low, that the cocaine use, drug use period, is way higher. And the numbers they're reporting on cocaine use is not even a drop in the bucket or a drop in a submarine. It's a lot of drugs coming through. So let's just go over quickly some of these numbers before I go to some Bible text here. So in June, the Coast Guard seized another narco sub in the Pacific with 17,000 pounds. So between May to July, you're doing a total of about 39,000 pounds. But in June, there was a big hit, 17,000 pound in one sub. Here, in the beginning of September, you're doing 12,000 pounds. So if in June you do 12, so you can see the numbers there quickly working, the amount they're catching per month, because you're talking about May, June, July, 3 months, you're doing about 13,000 pounds a month. And so if you do it by 12, that's 156,000 pounds of cocaine, just one type of drugs. And then if you do that by 16, which is, a pound is 16 ounces. So if you do that by 16, you have 2.5 million, ounces. That means if they said there's basically just for the interdiction alone every month, if they said there was 1.5 million users, that means just for the interdiction, each person that is taking cocaine, that's 1 point something ounce per person, almost 2 ounces per person, if you see what I'm saying. So if you're talking about almost 2 ounces per person just being caught just over there by the Coast Guard on the Pacific side, just imagine how much cocaine is coming in by plane, by truck, on the Atlantic side, probably if coming down through Canada, because they probably just fly it over there first, and then since the border is more porous, and then bring it back, probably drive it back into America. It's a lot of drugs, a lot of people taking drugs. So the point is, whatever we're thinking, the drug problem, not just the opiate problem, is way larger in my assessment of the numbers I'm seeing from the reports and from the amount of interdiction going on by sea, by air, by land, coming in through over by the truckloads. It's way more. And it's what I'm saying here is simply a society washed in drugs. And as I said, these numbers here just keep it in mind, these numbers here only reflect the drug use that has to do with cocaine. It has nothing else to do with the drug use for per se marijuana, although they had caught 933 pounds of marijuana. But remember, marijuana represents 70%, because some of the numbers I was looking at, but it's just too much numbers to share. Marijuana represents 70% of all new drug users. So there's about 5,000, I think, new drug users, 5,000 plus new drug users every day. And marijuana represent 70% of that. So that means little bit over 3 point something percent of a person that's gonna 3,000 something percent of 3,000 something of 1,000 new users each day. Most of them are gonna start off with marijuana. Cocaine represent a smattering. It's like 1% or something new user start with cocaine. Most people don't start with the heavy stuff. Most 70% start with marijuana, or they start off with prescription or something like that, prescription drugs. But as they get long-term into their drug use, then they start to go to like meth, cocaine, that type of drug, the opiates. But most people start off smoking weed, then they go on into stronger things. And so when you look at what's happening, then you can see that as I say, the issues are much more, because the drug use is pushed on by not one thing. It is pain, it is depression, and it's recreational. And so that's a plethora, so to speak, and other smaller things, but those are the main things that people start with drugs. People need something for their brain, they need something for fun, or they're in pain, and they take the pain away. Now, I believe that most people they don't start out probably for any of those three things. Most people, I think, start out recreationally, and later on it becomes another problem. So again, real quickly, if you look at those numbers, 39,000 in 3 months, representing $569 billion of value. So when you look at that, you can see that it's billions and billions of dollars. And when they talk about billions of dollars in value, what they're talking about also here is in it affects the economy, not just the amount of money leaving the pockets of the people that are using the drug, but also affect the economy, where some of the numbers were showing in the billions and billions of dollars each year for loss of productivity, for medical costs, for accidents, and for other illnesses and debility and all these things. Billions and billions. It's the numbers are so massive for drugs, alcohol, opiates. You know, the drugs cover all of that stuff and all the other stuff. Narcotics, marijuana. All of these affect loss of productivity, accidents, um, debility, sickness, medical sickness. Those four things cost the country so much money. So when we look at this, we see that the drug trade is booming. It is alive and well, because these numbers, these are just the interdictions. These are what the Coast Guard is catching. This doesn't include what's happening on the southern border. This doesn't include what's happening in the Atlantic. This doesn't include what's going on in the different airports. This is a massive campaign going on, and this does represent cocaine. This is not opiates, heroin. This is not the stuff coming out of the pharmaceutical company. None of this covers any of that. So I want to continue here now. I want to share some Bible text with you for this morning here. And what you notice now in Revelation 18, I'm going to read verse 23 to start. Revelation 18, verse 23. Now notice here in verse 23, it says here, talking about Babylon. And this is, as you know, Revelation 18, we understand is the last great message of mercy. It's the last thing. But notice, I'm going to read a few verses out of Revelation 18, but I'm going to start where I wanted to, per se, finish it off for this little sliver section. It says, "And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, and by thy sorceries were all the nations deceived." Now, as you probably heard from me before, when you read that text, you notice it's tied to the idea that the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Normally, this text, this concept of our teaching is used in the Old Testament when talking about destruction. And normally says, it was uses and says, well, one of the ways life is continuing and perpetuating and a nation continue from one generation to the next is with marriage, the celebration of two people joining lives together. When marriage stop being celebrated, then you know that something is gone wrong or is going wrong. This is one of these key things that you can watch. And as you know, a lot of the trends in the society, you have less and less people being married. And that's when you know a society is devastated. As you can see here, this is part of what's happening. So if you notice there, it's tied to this idea that there's three little movements going on in this little verse. First, you have, there's no light. The light shall shine no more. The light of the candle. What's the candle? The Bible says, you Christians, you are a light similar to a candle that you shine. And when there's enough light in a city, the city is like set on a hill. So the light of the candle shall shine no more in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more in thee. That means there's no more celebration of life. Life ceases. And it says, and thy merchants now, the business people, are the great men of the earth. So they're doing phenomenal, living large. But it says, by thy sorceries were the nations deceived. So most naturally, we know that this is pointing, one of the things obviously pointing to is sorcery, witchcraft, falsehood. But the root word for sorcery, if you go into your Young's Concordance and look this up, you'll find that the word sorcery, or if you have one in your phone, you can pull it up and you'll see that the original word is pharmakia. Pharmakia is where we get our modern word pharmacy, pharmaceuticals is where we get it. It's from witchcraft. It is similar to the word that we use for witchcraft because it's a deception. You're deceived into thinking something is what it's not. If you think about any drugs, marijuana, any psychoactive drugs, marijuana, coke, crack, cocaine, I did say that, that's a repeat, opiates, all of that. It is supposed to give you a feeling and change your perception so you perceive and you get an heightened experience even though you're not in a heightened experience. The same euphoria that you're supposed to feel when you run and you have a release of serotonin and stuff like that is the same that you'll get, but it's you're taking a substance. And if everything is not good, you take the drugs and you feel like you're airy. Everything's feel good. Everything is good. It's deceiving, right? It is delusional. It puts you into like LSD. You have a trip, but the trip is a beautiful trip. But you're not going through a beautiful trip. You could be on a bum, living on the side of the road, and you're having an excellent experience. You're high as a kite. So when you look at this and you take this together, you say, well, what's going on here? Well, it's same thing to do with witchcraft. What is witchcraft? It's basically getting a blessing while living a curse. That's to me is my simple definition of witchcraft. You're trying to get a blessing while living a cursed life. And the merchants are making money via witchcraft, via pharmakia. And if you look in the Bible again, you see the word is used also in Galatians chapter 5. You go to Galatians chapter 5 and you read about verse 19 somewhere there, without me going to there. When you see the word witchcraft, if you pull again in your Young's concordance, you pull a concordance, you have one on your phone, you'll notice here the word in Galatians when it says, the works of the flesh are these, and one of the things it's talk about is like variance, blah 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 blah, and it says witchcraft. You look up that word again, you see pharmakia, because what is witchcraft? Witchcraft again is always connected to a portion. The person in worship will be given a portion, and they drink the potion, and they'll have a spiritual experience. It's a high. That's all it was back in the past. The shaman do it. In the Hindu religion, the shaman will smoke ganja, or what we call marijuana, and they'll get a high. And the people will go into an altered state, and they'll come back next week or whenever for the next worship. Worship was, drug use actually was connected with worship. And interesting enough, I've been saying it for years now that I believe that more and more there's going to be a conversions, a meeting of the mind, so to speak, that it's best to use drugs in a controlled environment with a practitioner. Yeah, you've probably, if you listen to me often enough, you heard me say this, and I've been saying for years, that just like because remember everything, as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is going to come back to what it was before. It's almost like people are going to figure it out. Yeah, no, probably this is the best way. The old people had it right. Because the way drugs used to be used for the most part was with a witch or a shaman or a Hindu. I can't remember the name of a Hindu person. What's this called? Well, a wise man, a Hindu wise man, or a Native American wise man. And what he'll do, he'll give you the peyote, or the shaman will give you the natural LSD potion. I can't remember his name. And you will take that drugs, and then you go into an altered state, and then you go into a trip. And then that would be part of worship. And then they'll drum. Because when you drum, it makes you, it hits you, but you feel no pain, as Bob Marley says. So you have an altered experience with the drumming and everything like that. Notice we're going back to that. It is back to that voodoo, whatever you call it. But it always is connected with some hallucinogen. So you get to experience God in a euphoric state, in the European Catholic worship they would call it, like you have forget all that either. But you'd have an experience where you go into a trip like state. In the Hindu, they're going to a trance. And notice when people talk about what they call spiritual formation, it's basically trying to force yourself into that mental trance by repeating a mantra. But I believe that all of this is going to one place. And so into all of what I just said in the last 2 minutes is going to converge where they're just like, man, forget about this. Let's just take the drugs and go do worship. Ironically enough, I was watching an interview, I think it was last month, and for the first time I heard somebody actually said it outside of myself. I was hearing, I think it was a psychologist I was watching, and he was saying that he believed that it would best for people to have a guide or a spiritual person. So when they take the drugs, it's not just purely recreational. Because he says right now, a lot of the problem is coming from pure recreational use. Because if you have like a DMT, normally it's a shaman or somebody would guide you through the use of the DMT. Well, this is where a lot of it is going, and I've been saying I believe that's where it's going to end up, because I believe the rates are much higher, but the deaths are happening. Well, what it is that because you have also the synthetic use and all that type of stuff. So we are seeing here similar. We're getting there because remember the Bible tells us this is what's coming, and if you study prophecy, it is more is coming. It's not going to be less, because the Bible makes it very clear that we're going into a spiritual point of view, and always with spiritualism, drug use is part of it. It's just a natural part because it's fake. So you have to enhance fakeness. And what's the quickest way to enhance fakeness and get a high without honestly getting a high by the working of the Holy Spirit in your life? It's a fake spirit. It's a devilish spirit. It's to just use drugs. And so you can get that high, but you never have to get the high from naturally getting the high from what the highs that are created in our brain and whatever our liver does. You're getting the high by forcing it on the body. It's a fake forced spiritual high. You don't have a high Sabbath, you have a drug-induced Sabbath. I've known people go to church on Sabbath high as a kind. So I'm going to read it again for you, and then you can do your own studies in this. And notice it says, the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. So there's no light anymore. It's just pure darkness. This is what's coming. And notice a person's going through a drug experience. Their life becomes darker and darker, and they go closer towards death. It's not going towards life. They're trying to kill themselves, but one poison at a time. There's just a problem with these synthetics. They're so powerful that they could kill you immediately. But there's no more light. You're not going to get a light from a person who is in drug and use experience. Yes, somebody can say, but there's these guys over here, and they smoke the weed and they whatever. That's a whole other story. Notice here, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. No more celebration. You think about these areas that have a drug epidemic. Who primarily died, as I mentioned earlier, is the young men. All these deaths are happening in New York and Pittsburgh. It's young men. Men that are supposed to be leading out families. They're dropping like flies. Most of the drug deaths from the opiate epidemic. Remember, we were just talking about cocaine. We didn't even touch opiates. I know they died from fentanyl, but the point is they thought they were taking cocaine. It's a white powder. The white horse that you ride, that white horse onto glory. So they're taking that white powder, and notice it's mostly men that are dying. So there's no weddings. We not hear no bride celebrate or no bridegroom, because it's just dead bodies piling up. And this is coming from pharmacia. Notice here, it says also that the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants. Who? The merchants. Who sent all this cocaine? You know, I know that this was the problem in America. They spend all the time arresting a little guy on the side of the street. But it's big merchants that were doing this. Notice that merchants were the great men of the earth. Who is involved in this? The great men. This, they told a lie to the people across the world for so many years. And the lie was that the guy on the side of the street that's selling, that little guy that got caught with how many pounds of cocaine that killed those people in Pittsburgh, he's going to go to prison. He might spend 20 years to life. It would make sense if he did life. He's the problem, they'll say. But notice here, a small guy, nobody probably you know, I don't know the millionaires you know, but I don't know plenty of those. So the small guy, even a person that's probably worth $1 million, cannot pull one of these off. This interdiction that they did here was a submarine, semi-submersible, 40-foot long, a 40-foot long. Most of you here probably don't own a 40-foot long boat, much less a submarine that's 40-foot long, that's submersible, that's self-propelled, that had four drug smugglers. The other one that they caught in June with 17,000 pounds, it was a narco sub again, and they had more people on it. So this type of operation is massive, and the value of the drug is massive. The one that they caught in this month here, in the beginning of the month, was worth street value for $165 million. Who is doing this type of drug smuggling? Who's paying for this? It has to be that you go back to your Bible, you read the Bible, and you say, I don't care what they're reporting to me. My Bible tells me that it's the merchant men that are the great men of the earth. Now, I'm not going to call no names here, but you have to have great money to pull this off. Great. To be selling it. So when you're talking about these guys were from Colombia, then it has to be some of the great men in Colombia, great men in the United States. And think about it, if you have the means to move street value worth $165 million worth of cocaine within the United States, and then total caught was $565 million worth of cocaine within the United States. That means those who are receiving it on the American side. If you look at the pictures, if you go online and you find this article, you look at the pictures, it's a ton. Think about it. 12,000 pounds is basically 6 tons. Is the equivalent. If you look at the pictures, you see that it looks like about the equivalent of about 6 skids. If you just look at 6 skid load of, say, compost, like, say, I don't know, whatever, some dirt. It's like 6 skids of dirt. And you're going to move it. You got to be some real serious player. You're not like a little boy on the side of the road moving a kilo or 2 or 3 or 5 kilo or 10 kilos. You got to be huge to have a network big enough to handle 6 skid loads of cocaine and move that and traffic that. But yet, I didn't need to read that from somebody. Just like my topic here, the rate of drug use seemed to be much higher, That's my topic. Why? Because when I read the Bible tells me, Lord, look, this is going to be a problem. Watch this in the last days. And I've been looking at it, and the problem is bigger. The more you look, the more you realize it's bigger. But when your Bible tells you, look, I'm going to read it again. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. Who? The great men. Think about who caused the current opiate epidemic. It's the big pharmaceutical companies. It's the big pharmaceutical companies cause the current epidemic of drug problem. Well, let me ask you this. Who are they? They're the great men of the earth. They're some of the richest people that walk the face of the planet. But yet they were the ones selling all these drugs and created an epidemic. But if I ask you probably 10 years ago, and I go to this text and I say, hey, look, who's going to be the main person selling the drugs? You would say, well, no, the guy on the side of the street. And then I say, but the Bible says the great men. And you'd be like, no, it's the guy on the side of the street. He's the problem. We need to arrest all of them, put them in prison. See, that's how we can be fooled and tricked. And then if you're on drugs, you're even more tricked. Because you go to somebody on drugs, they're going to say, no, it's the guy on the side of the street. He's the one that sold me the drugs. Which is true. He sold them the drugs. But who's bringing drugs at that rate? Look at the rate of drug. Look at the rate of drug being brought in. You realize it's a lot of drugs. The great men of the earth. And notice here, for by thy sorceries, which is thy pharmakia, were all the nations deceived. Now somebody would say, well, isn't that has to do with spiritual deception? Yeah, that too. I believe that is included here. Spiritualism will be on the rise. But what is spiritualism? Spiritualism is always connected, as I say, to drug use. This is how I always see it. And this is what we see continuing. So notice here, just for clarity, and notice here, the Bible is going to explain a little bit more. In Revelation 18 verse 11 says, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, For no man buyeth their merchandise any more, merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearl, fine linen, and silk, scarlet, and tine wood, and all manner of vessel, all manner of most precious woods, brass, iron, and marble. Notice verse 13. And cinnamon and odor and ointment and frankincense and wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beast, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls of men. Notice at the end here it says slaves and souls of men. So when you see this, you see clearly that all of this type of traffic, even what we have as over slavery, will be as we move towards the end. It's the same thing. If I say to somebody, hey, slavery will be at the end, they'll say, where you getting that from? Right there. It says it right there. That they will, towards the end, they will traffic in slaves and souls of men. And he continues. But these are the great men of the earth. Just in case somebody says, so who are the merchants? The merchants are the great men of the earth. Somebody said, who are you talking about? I'm not going to give you no name. You just look at the great men of the earth. What are they trafficking in? They're trafficking in all these things. And as I say, look at what they're doing now. They're trying to settle or sue the major pharmaceutical companies that knew that the opiate was dangerous and kept on pushing it and covered the information, lie, and got a whole bunch of people dead. And most of it is men. So if I go and say, well, who's responsible for the opiate epidemic? Well, the Bible tells you the great men of the earth. Who are the great men? The merchants. They're merchandising in souls and slave and body of men. And this is not soft slavery. I believe this is all we're seeing now with the sweatshops, the free trade agreements, all these things that are going on. And this is what's happening. So I'll read a few more just to pull together this thing. Notice here, I'll read for you here in Galatians chapter 5, verse 19 and 20. It says, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft. In the original, it would be pharmakia, hatred, variance, emulation, wrath, strife, sedition, heresy. Notice again, witchcraft, pharmakia is normally two branch to it. One is that pharmaceutical, because it's a deception. The other part is getting a blessing without getting a blessing, without doing a blessed thing. Bless me so I shall be prosperous, but you ain't working. You see, that's witchcraft. I want to feel good, but I want to do good. I don't want to be good. I don't want to eat a healthy diet. I don't want to exercise. I want to do nothing. I want to do everything that make me feel like I'm a piece of garbage, but I want to feel good. So the witch say, oh yes, son, I have a brew for you. And she mix something up, pour in your cup, you drink it. I'm like, oh man, I feel so good. Thanks, witch. That's basically how it is. But the people who are doing this are the great men of the earth. And you see, the problem is that people are deceived by this is why I'll read again. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1. It says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. The thing deceive you into having an experience that you're not having. And because of the deception, you will fall into it. Notice when you read Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 and 7, Genesis 3, verse 6 and 7, you notice Eve is having a similar experience. But the flip of it is that she's first deceived, and then she partake of the fruit. But the fruit is a forbidden fruit, but the fruit will change your experience. I'm going to say it again. Eve, before she ate, she was deceived into partaking of a fruit that is told her that she would have had an exchange experience. She ate the fruit in a false notion or concept in her mind. She has a change experience, but the change experience is destructive to her. Her eyes were open. If you listen to people who take drugs, they say they have a fresh experience, it's a brand new experience, and they keep chasing the high. But what it is a false experience, and it destroys the mind and body. But it deludes the person thinking that they're having a great experience. Notice here, Genesis 3, verse 6 and 7. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food. No, it's not good for food. She perceives it in her mind because she's deceived. And that it was pleasant to the eyes. Really? And a tree to be desired to make one wise. That's people talking about weed. If you read this text and listen to a Rastaman talk about weed, it is absolutely like he's quoting this text. It is unbelievable. because he talks about the weed the same way. It's such a beautiful plant. Oh, I love it. Because they're deceived. Notice here, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat. And then she passed the country on the left hand side. Notice here, she did eat, and God also gave and so and not God but she, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. She deceived. She saw it as something pleasant and good for food. She partook of the drugs or the fruit, and then she pass it on, share the drugs with others. But remember, this drug, this fruit, is gonna make her selfish. But at first, she think this is a great experience. Come on, Adam, go ahead, bite. Verse 7, and the eyes of them were both open. So the eyes of them were both open, and they knew that they were naked. Something changed. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Notice you'll find the same thing. A person that's under the influence of drugs and alcohol that is deceived by it, they know something is wrong and change. So they start to sew now fig leaves of religiosity, and they start to make up all kind of excuse. You everything that person on the drugs is talking to you is a bunch of craziness. Because what happened? They're trying to spin a weave of a silk garment. They try to spin some type of stuff. They're always spinning because they're naked. They made a mistake, and the mistake is going to whip them for the rest of their life. And they're not going to stop the whipping because they're chasing or they're trying to prove that they're in the right. They're in the right, and they need to stop and say, "Look, I repent. I made a mistake." It's the same thing we deal with a person who now drink the wine of Babylon. They're deceived by some false doctrine, and they're going to go to the grave defending that false doctrine before they're saying, whoa, this thing is messing me up. You watch a person in false doctrine, it's the same thing. It's messing up their life and they can't let it go. They're like a monkey that's caught and they can't let go of the trap because the bait and the trap is one. And it's going to cause them to die, but they don't care because they're going to prove you. This was Adam and Eve stuck. Jesus had to come and deliver them. And that's what it is with all of this type of stuff, is that without Christ's deliverance, we in a mess because we're deceived. We believe, and the thing that deceives us is killing us, but we can't let it go. This is what sin is. This is what all deception is. We get caught up into some type of bad habit, some type of drugs, some type of philosophy, some type of bad habit practice that is destroying our life, that's reaming us out, and we can't let it go. And the reason why we can't let it go is because we have become deceived to it, and we now have to defend a position, and now we're chasing the high because we want to experience our initial experience that we had, because we had a high when we accept it. Imagine a person having a boring experience in church. They pick up a false doctrine, and now they're having a grand spiritual awakening, and it's a facade. It's a farce. And then when they realize it's a farce and it's messing up everything in their life, they can't let it go. It doesn't enrich their life. So we want to approach life like this. We want to approach life like this, where we know that when we get stuck into a bad position, we don't do like Adam and Eve and say, whoa, I need to cover my nakedness. What we need to say is, wait a minute, I'm naked. What's happening here? That wasn't supposed to happen. I need to go back to the Lord. I need to give up this thing. I need to let it go. I made a mistake. But often we don't want to admit the fact that we made a mistake. And this becomes our undoing. So many people are deceived by it. So many people are using it. But as I stated here, is that I believe that the drug use is much larger. I believe the problem is much bigger. And I believe there more to be more talk about this, because more people are being caught up ignorantly, thinking that they're starting out a good life with this new marijuana, which is a dangerous, experimental, horrible drugs that is killing people, and getting people trapped into a lifestyle of harder drugs later on. Now we need to be more talking about this thing. This is more dangerous. It's a bigger problem. More people are using drugs than we think, and they're around us. They're part of us. They're family members. They're loved ones. We need to talk to them to tell them to stay away from drugs is bad for you. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word this day and the blessing that you continue to bestow in our lives. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might stay sober, that we might have temperance, and that we might turn to thee whenever we are trapped in any bad habit. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow morning, where we should talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.